Here's another stats video, this one using the correlation between two variables to predict future or unknown values using something called the Meyer method. Let's see what that's all about. Now, so far in these videos, we've seen some basic correlation questions that might come up on an exam. But we could see correlation pop up in word problems too. And if we see it in one of those word problems, they're probably asking us to use the correlation to predict future values or unknown values in a relationship between two variables. Now, this is easiest to explain through an example. So here's a table of data points between two variables, x and y. And specifically, this table is showing the relationship between the age and the height of oak trees. Now you can see that in general, although it's not a perfect relationship, the older the tree is, the taller it gets. Because as x, which is the age, gets bigger, generally the y is following and getting bigger too, and y represents the height of the trees. Now in reality, this trend can't continue forever. Why is that? Well, as trees continue to age, their growth slows down a little bit. So we wouldn't really see this trend continue on forever just the way it's going now. But what if the question was asking us to find the age of a tree that isn't given on the table? Now, one option would be to make a scatter plot graph of all these points and see how the trend looks, and then extend that trend to help us predict what a future value might be. Now, this wouldn't be the most accurate way to do it, and if we didn't have a graph, that wouldn't help us at all. So we're going to use something called the Meyer method. And the Meyer method has us use the table of values, or the data in the table of values, to predict unknown values in this relationship. So to use the Meyer method, the first thing I'm going to do is look at my table of values and cut it in half vertically to separate it into a top half and a bottom half. Now you'll be given an even number of data points in your table, so you'll be able to split it in half really nicely. If you weren't given an even number, what you could do is take that middle value, the one that doesn't really fit in the top or the bottom, and include it in both. So when you're calculating, if you had an odd number, count the middle value when you calculate in the top half and when you calculate in the bottom half. Now, what's this calculating I'm talking about? Well, once we split the table in half, we have to calculate the mean for both x and y in the top half and the bottom half. So I'm going to be calculating 4 different means or averages. So take a look at my top half values for x. I'm going to take all of these and calculate the mean. I'm going to do the same thing for the top half values of the y column and get a different mean for that. Now the mean that I calculated for those top half x values, I'm going to call that x1. And the mean of the top half y values, I'll call y1. I'm going to do the same thing in the bottom half for both x and y. And whatever I get for the mean on x, I'll call x2 on that bottom half. And the bottom half y will be called y2. Now, if you need a review on how to calculate the mean, you can check out the link to the video that's in the description of this one. So once I find these 4 means, 2 for x and 2 for y, I'm going to use x1, y1 and x2, y2 to help me build a rule. And the rule represents the relationship between these two variables, x and y. Now this is giving me a rule that's based on the mean values of x and y, a pretty good way to build a rule that represents the trend pretty well. And if you need a refresher on how to build a rule or an equation given sets of data points, there's a link to that video in the description of this video as well. So once I have that rule, all I need to do is plug in the value that they're asking me about. In this case, it's going in for x, and solve for the other variable. And once I solve for that other variable, what I've done is I've predicted an unknown value or a future value given a table of existing data points. So a quick recap of what I did there. I took a table of values, I split it in half, I took the mean for x and y on the top half and bottom half, and from those 4 values, I built a rule that represents the relationship between x and y. And once I had the rule, all I had to do was plug in the value they were asking about to get my final answer. Now remember, this is called the Meyer method, used to predict unknown values in a relationship. And this is how we would see correlation pop up in a word problem. Now take a look at another example to make sure you understand how it works.